welcome back to the Respect the Drive podcast. I'm Tedward here at Garage 42 in Acton, Massachusetts. I'm laughing because I'm already thrilled about my guest today. We'll get to that in a second. But here is where I'm storing my cars for the winter, but it's more than simply winter storage. This is fleet management, and I'm starting to get more and more into the idea of utilizing these guys for things that I otherwise don't like doing. I don't like swapping winter wheels and tires over on my cars. I don't like bringing my cars to the dealership or to their service locations for maintenance. I don't have to do that anymore because they will bring your cars to your appointments. They will swap your wheels and tires. They've got tire balancer and mounter here as well. So if you're just sending stuff over to get done, hey, I need some new PS4Ss on my BMW, my Ferrari, my Porsche, send it here. They'll mount them. The car will be ready for you. So hit up Garage 42 for all your fleet management needs and enabling the purchase of more cars because, hey, you don't have room at your house. I don't have room at my house. Maybe your spouse or your kids think you're a goofball and they can't believe this is what you're spending their college funds on. Well, now you can hide it.
Fair. Totally fair.
Anyway, check out Garage 42 in Acton, Massachusetts. I also want to give a shout out to Grid Forge I think they're in Beverly right now. But my friend Mike Alberding has a new company where this is like the best automotive tchotchkes in the world because my key tray, it's a wooden key tray and it has the emblem etched in laser, Porsche, Honda, Lexus. So I have my key. I don't lose my keys anymore. I always lost my keys. And now I don't lose my keys because they're in this beautiful little thing. I've even got this little aluminum one that has a Fuchs wheel etched into it. It's CNC machine. So you can get those. You can also get some nice wall art. They do these incredible elevation accurate racetracks. So I've got the Nürburgring and they put the Honda Civic Type R lap record on that. So it's all just the kind of stuff you want to put in your apartment if you're a single man or in your office where you have free reign of your home to have goofy car stuff. So Grid Forge Manufacturing, another real quick one. I still got to keep shouting out Mike's Auto Body North in Saugus because they did an incredible job on my Lexus. It was not in a massive accident or anything of the sort. It simply just had some rock chips that were rusting on the hood. He took care of it. And this is your guy because, yeah, maybe it's just my Lexus GX460, but this was so emblematic of the work he could do because he did the entire hood. It matched perfectly. And when you walk into that building, you will see Porsches, Ferraris, Lamborghinis. This is who is trusted for this kind of work. This is not some chop shop that's just getting the job done so you can sell the car. This is someone who will do the work and you'll never even remember you backed it into a wall at a racetrack. You'll never remember that you hit a tree backing into a spot at Walmart, whatever. Anyway, those are my plugs right now. If you would like to sponsor the podcast for pennies, I'm talking cheap, send me a few bucks. All you got to do is pay for gas for me to get, I should start doing some headhunting on, I need a sales department.
I get that. Totally get that.
Anyway, today I have a guest that I always love talking to. My friend Thanasi, you are the least appreciated genius savant in this sphere. I swear to God, because
my gas tank's empty and you filled it. Thank you.
I'm constantly thinking, I wonder what this is about. I wonder what will happen to Nissan. I wonder what will happen with Volkswagen or any of these car companies. Or I'm curious where the market is going. You are like the pundit that we need, and your name isn't in the places that I need it to be. So that's why I call you and say, get on the podcast, because I genuinely believe you have one of the most educated, well-rounded, and I guess like you're not a what's the word? You're not like partisan. I watch you.
Totally.
You've owned and driven everything. You're not like EVs are the bane of my existence, or
EV only. Yeah.
No, you're not like a V8 hater. You're not a environmental like I can't believe they're regulating noxious gases. Well, we're human. We breathe. That's nice. So I just think you're a really good person to like actually think and talk two things about. Anyway,
wow, thank you.
I have a list of things that I want to talk about.
Yeah, let's do it.
And it's funny because when I talk to Eddie, all I want to do is talk about like a little bit of bullshit. When it comes to you, I suddenly become like a newscaster where I'm like, GM loses $5 billion in China. What do you think?
More at 11.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, ooh, this is actually really interesting. So there's a few things that I do. Let's actually start with GM. General Motors has put so many eggs in their EV basket, right? And it appears that they really need Ultium platform to work. But over the years, like sales are a little soft. Cars are a little expensive. You know, we look at Silverado EV. That's an expensive vehicle. And it was touted as this halo, like Hail Mary thing where you're like, yeah, sure. Okay, Ford, we have 440 miles of range.
Yeah.
The problem was that they got that range with more battery. It wasn't some trick. It wasn't Lucid saying we're getting 5 miles per kilowatt hour. They still only get like maybe 2 at best. And they just added batteries. So it's heavy. It doesn't ride that well, especially unloaded. And now in China with BYD about to surpass Tesla as like the most sales of any auto manufacturer in the world, GM is having trouble. So where do we see this going? Is there any walkbacks? What's the strategy going forward?
Yeah, I think GM is so interesting. They managed to create, to their credit, they perfectly encapsulate the ethos in the vehicles they make, even though they're EVs. Like the Hummer EV is a inefficient EV that does the off-road thing.
Yes.
Which was a Hummer, right? Like the H2, same deal. The Silverado EV ultimately is a really good work truck.
It is.
Their problem is it just not 40 grand like it was supposed to be. But like
it's 100. It's $96,000, I think.
You can get if you're crafty about it in like the 60s, but even still 60 grand is 60 grand, right? But it, over 300 miles of range, charges at that rate, so nice, so fast, all the way through the range. Like it does all the things. I mean, the Equinox EV, pretty cheap.
I'm getting one tomorrow for a few days.
Tremendous. Excited to hear what you think about it.
And I got a message from the PR guy who was like, hey, I know you've already driven this and you drove the faster one. Please just keep it in context that this is, I said,
the better. This is better.
Exactly. That's what I said to him. I'm like, dude, I think people might not like maybe they watch me drive like Ferraris and Lamborghinis and think I'm some like elitist pig. I'm like, no. The family EV should not go 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds.
Correct. Or cost over 40, honestly.
Absolutely. So I think the Equinox to me, I'm like, Blazer, Prologue, that sort of platform. I'm like, I just don't know where the value is here. It does enough, but not for the money.
Yep.
Equinox, I'm like, let's go. Give me the slowest one. Give me 2-wheel drive.
Yep.
Like that's where I'm like, ooh, guess what? I'm in my happy place. So that car makes a lot of sense.
So they're certainly doing some things correct. I think the Equinox is great. I think their Bright Drop stuff, which they just rolled into GM, which for those that don't know, is like the FedEx vans that GM makes that are full EV. You can see them if you're in California consistently, but they're starting to roll out to the rest of the world.
I don't know if I've seen these yet.
They're really well priced, immense levels of range for what it is, right?
Sure.
So they're doing some things correct. To your point, though, I do think they need to remember where they came from. They had a really, really good recipe. The dang Chevrolet Volt.
Baby.
Right? Which was awesome. An extended range electric vehicle that you could have run purely on EV for realistically the majority of your daily commute, right? And then when you're doing long range, you fill it up, you keep going. I'm pretty confident they have to, or they are going to get back to that point for a lot of their vehicles because they're not going to do the Series hybrid thing as well as Toyota. You'll never catch the RAV4 hybrid. You're not going to catch Kia, Hyundai.
It's not going to happen.
The hybrid. So go back to what made you in an environment where more people understand EVs today. No one did in 2014, 2013, 2012. So like the car was kind of lost.
Well, and pricing is a big thing because I look to Chevrolet as a cheaper alternative to a foreign econo car. So for me, like if I'm buying a Chevrolet, of course, there's the Cadillacs and the Corvettes and things. But if it's $99 or $19.99, I might buy a Cavalier or a Sunfire instead of a Civic or, what's the Toyota, the Corolla.
Yeah,
right?
correct. Yeah.
I can't believe that's bad.
No, but you got the Sunfire.
I got
so
that.
that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. So I guess what I'm saying is like when it comes to the EVs, I feel like they maybe just like Jeep has been doing, where suddenly there's like a $90-something thousand Grand Wagoneer. I feel like maybe they played their post-COVID hand a little high on what they think people are willing to spend.
Sure.
And Volkswagen's played this game in the past too, where they come up with a Phaeton. Well, guess what? Phaeton's fucking awesome. You've owned one.
It's tremendous.
It's a cool car, but people do not want to spend that kind of money on something with a Volkswagen nameplate on it. So that's a problem. Then you have to basically put that same technology into a Bentley. You can charge double and they'll buy it, but you can't play that game. So I just, when I see these trucks, yes, I like the Hummer. The Hummer to me was a we will operate at a loss to get our point across.
Yeah,
which
totally.
was to showcase the technology.
Yep. Crab walk, all that stuff.
And to grab, let's say, politically partisan people who otherwise would never look at an EV because they're saying like, I'm not driving some fucking Prius. Well, guess what? We're going to give you a 10,000 pound vehicle that can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. And I've off-roaded these things in Moab. They are insane.
I believe that.
It's incredible. These things are like, I've watched these things do things that I'm like, oh, it actually walks the talk.
Yeah,
like,
correct.
It's crazy.
Correct.
So I got that. But then when you take that down and you say, okay, now we've got the Hummer, sure, maybe this isn't going to sell great, but it gets our point across. It gets people interested in the fact that like electric vehicles can do things, and maybe it will take a little bit of that like soft edge off of EV owners where they're like, oh, you're just trying to save the world. It's like, no, this thing's actually pretty fucking rad.
Totally.
Then you come into the truck and you're like, well, okay, but it still costs basically the same as the Hummer.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that potentially gets lost in EV realm is like ultimately outside of the Bolt, this is their first foray into more than one EV, right?
Yep.
The Blazer, the Silverado, the Equinox, the whatever. You keep going down like all the EVs they're making are the first ones in those segment with the Ultium battery. So in theory, right, if you subscribe to the thought that all technology goes to zero unless there's innovation or things that maintain or increase the price, the next generation of said model should be cheaper, right? Which is why the Equinox is coming in the 30s.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever ends up replacing the Blazer soon should be lower, maybe high 30s, low 40s. Whatever replaces the Silverado and Sierra EV should be 50s and 60s instead of 60, 70, 80, 90, 100K, right? So we're going through that problem right now. And to your point about Volkswagen, they're going through that right now with ID Buzz, right? People look at this van and say, oh my goodness, it's an EV van that costs 60, 70 grand, 78 grand if you get a first edition ID Buzz. Two things there. One, it's their first one. It's naturally going to be the most expensive. The Model S was so much more expensive if you adjust from inflation versus
100%.
where it is today.
Sure.
So like it's the same deal. Right now, are people gonna buy it? No. Right? Maybe the diehards or maybe a lease them if they do something crazy, but ultimately, like prices will go down. In theory, they should.
And it is funny when you have an ID Buzz that costs that much money, when the bus represents sort of like this shaggy everyman, like nomadic, like hippie, who probably spent $25 on their bus in the 1960s just to get from concert to concert or whatever, you know? And then you're like, oh, and now it's like only a rich person could afford it.
Totally.
So
100%.
It's so
ridiculous.
bizarre. Now, great, I understand that. Like, if you have a nice, how many? What's the
21 window whatevers. Yeah.
Yes, they're very expensive.
Totally.
I get that. But anyway, how does all right, so GM, I think, unlike a lot of other car companies, has hedged bets by a lot of their EVs are also available in ICE. Like you can still get an ICE Silverado, you can still get an ICE Equinox, you can still get an ICE Blazer, right? You can ICE Blazer, right?
It's a 3.8 V6 pin.
Yeah. So like they kind of like they did put their whole foot in the pool, but they have a second pool, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, well, in case people aren't cool with this, we still have these,
right?
Which I learned specifically from Mark Royce in a car because we went on a drive together.
Saw that,
And I'm like, so what's going on? And it's real. The trouble is, it's very difficult to speak to someone who is an executive, a president of a company, and kind of figure out, like, you know, what you're really trying to get at when you talk to someone like that you'll never get is, where's this going to go wrong for you?
Yeah,
that's all you want to ask,
right?
But you can't, because that's not the strategy. You can't say that.
Yeah, right.
They work for the shareholders, right?
Totally.
So they have to be like, it's gonna work. It's gonna be great. Meanwhile, you're like, what's making you sweat?
Yeah,
all I want to know is what's freaking you out. Are you thinking about China? Are you thinking about BYD? What keeps you up at night? And where are you like, shit? if I knew this 8 months ago, we wouldn't have done that. You know, those are the things I want to know. But speaking of China, like, I feel like I have this huge blind spot with BYD because I don't actively research this. And BYD is selling like crazy, but this is where I feel like it's like America's North Korea, and I don't know what's going on outside of my country.
Sure.
Because there are not, unless you are like actively searching for this stuff and like, oh, there's another car company that's selling like hotcakes and crazy. Well, yeah. And so I'm like, I'm a victim of the propaganda machine.
Sure.
Where it's like, no, look over here.
Definitely.
You don't need to know about any of this stuff. So what is your experience with BYD in terms of like understanding, and what do you think they're doing better than the American or Germans, really?
Totally. Yeah. So,
or Japanese.
Do you know how they got their start roughly?
I don't.
So BYD got their start mainly because they reverse engineer. So they see Corolla and they're like, we need to make Corolla natively in China for the Chinese market. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to buy one and we're going to do the Chinese thing where we reverse engineer and attempt to sell.
Classic.
BYD's first car literally is as close as they could get a reverse engineered Corolla.
Okay.
They missed on some things. They nailed some other things, whatever. The brand has evolved into, largely thanks to government subsidy for helping them get to the point to where they are today, a brand that not only sells EVs, right? Like the tank.
Okay.
We see videos on this thing every day. Right. The thing that can float in water or whatever, you know. But anyway, they sell EVs. They also sell hybrids. They also sell plug-in hybrids. They sell a variety of vehicles. They also go above. They sell buses. They sell like the Hino trucks kind of thing that you see. They sell everything.
And I would imagine the alacrity of their development and subsequent sales is akin to that of like rushing the Cybertruck out. It's just that they have probably billions of dollars getting funneled in by the government to make it happen better.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? And like cars like the Dolphin or whatever BYD's cheapest model is, I'm pretty sure it's the Dolphin.
You could say anything. You could call it the Swordfish.
The
and be like,
Evian
the
BYD. Yeah. It sells for sub 20 Gs.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
which you can't beat that, right?
No. And that's the thing is what's frustrating. Okay. This is where I may come off as a bit anti-capitalist.
Ooh.
I get frustrated because I would like to see less cars on the road. And unfortunately, the idea of an environmental solution to internal combustion cars is more electric cars, where I'm like, well, actually it's trains.
Yeah, right. Public transit in general.
And so, you know, to have like when I go to Logan Airport, I don't drive there anymore. What I do is I drive to Framingham or Woburn and I get on the Logan Express.
Correct.
It costs $9 each way.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind to park at Logan, day one costs $75 or $76.
Yep.
And then every day after that is like $50 or $60.
Yep.
So it's very, very expensive. And if you go and park at like a Logan Express, it costs like $9 a day. So, but every time I'm driving into Boston on that bus, I feel like I'm doing a service because when there's 50 people or 30 people on that bus, I'm like, we just took 30 to 50 cars off the road.
Correct.
That makes me feel like, okay, cool. Because when I'm bitching about traffic, well, I'm alone in a car.
Yeah, right.
I'm the problem.
Right,
It's
right.
me.
Totally.
Taylor Swift is right. I'm the problem.
It's true.
It's like, I can't believe I'm sitting here bitching about why are there so many? It's because the car. So when it comes to like super affordable EVs, I'm always like, oh, good. And then I'm like, I almost, it's hard because you want to, there's a weird game where you're like, am I being elitist and classist by saying, well, if cars were super fucking expensive, we would have less cars on the road. But then you would only have rich people in cars, which I think is bullshit. Right. But the reality is, or if we spent a lot of money on infrastructure in order to make public transit easy, it would be better. Because even getting from Boston to New York, I fly. I don't drive. I fly, and I can't take a train because the train takes for fucking ever.
It takes the same time as driving.
Which is insane, because if you told Japan, hey, I need to go like less than 300 miles, you would get on a train and be there in like 45 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Totally.
It would be like, oh, okay.
An hour and a half tops.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
100%.
it was just, it is frustrating. And that's where I'm like, I always want to be careful because I'm a car enthusiast, but I also think like, well, I would have more fun in a car if there were less cars on the road.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is like allowing everyone to do. Now, the weird thing to me is I thought that as cars got more expensive, which they're wicked expensive right now. Like the average price of a car sale in the United States is something like $50,000.
Yeah, it's like it varies between like 47 to 50 something.
It's
but yeah,
crazy.
It's right up there.
It's super high. I thought that would remove cars from the road, but but it really hasn't. All it has done is increased debt of the average consumer. So you're like, oh shoot, like. But the reality, what that tells you, is that people are willing to make this like near suicidal financial choice because they're forced to do it because there's no other way to get anywhere.
Correct. Yeah,
and that's frightening.
Yeah, and that largely speaks to public sentiment around the notion of public transit too, right? Like someone would rather go 45K into debt to have a BMW 330 instead of take the Acela to New York. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like something like that.
I get it.
Just because of the look of, driving a BMW versus being on the train.
Yes.
In America.
100%.
And I'm sure other parts of the world too.
Well, and that is kind of the American thing. It's like you sitting in your car, it's a right.
Yeah, correct.
We are all philosophers in our own right because we spend so much time by ourselves in a car.
Sure.
You're like, I got a lot of time to think.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone should what am I trying to say? I don't think you should try to take that away from somebody.
No.
But to your point, if public transit is in a place where it is a viable solution for if I live 30 minutes north of Boston, I can get to Boston, then what I'm driving, matters more. It almost like goes hand in hand, right?
Yes.
Because if I'm using public transit every day, I want the vehicle in my driveway to be one that's good.
Special.
I want it to be nice, even if it's an SUV, even if it's a whatever. Like I want it to do the thing well. Whatever it is, So I think to your earlier point, like circling back to the cheap EV thing with BYD, like what they've done is make a wide variety of EVs that are largely fine, but they're marginally cheaper than everything. Like the Model 3 competitor is like 5 to 7K cheaper than a Model 3. The BYD Dolphin's under 20 grand. They make, you know what I mean? Like they undercut you everywhere.
Do you think EVs survive if there's no incentives? Like the government is subsidizing the EV thing right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, you get your $7,500 tax credit or whatever. And it's like, okay, but like if that doesn't exist, it's like, is this viable?
Yeah, I think so. I think companies in their first iteration of EVs will have a hard time, but I think EVs overall do fine. The perfect example is Model 3 right now. You can get a Model 3 rear-wheel drive long range, which has 363 miles of range in an EV. That's largely fine for 43 grand. Like it's a car that competes with a 330 and it's roughly the same price.
Yeah.
So like that makes it now today with incentives insane. You can lease one for like $300 a month,
Sure.
which is better than any other car you can lease for $300 a month. But I also think that if you remove those things and just more price parity with the cars it actually competes against, it'll probably still do fine and sell.
Which brings me to Nissan. So Nissan's in trouble. There was like the famous article, like Nissan has, 12 to 14 months to live, which okay, but it's Nissan. They're not going anywhere. Because the thing is, Nissan sales have not necessarily declined. Infinities have, but Nissan hasn't. It's just that they took on this sort of subprime thing where they're like, oh, we're just going to maybe people don't choose our cars over the competition, but if they can't get approved for a loan, we will.
Yeah.
I talked about this with Eddie a little bit on my last podcast where I think I'm like, well, Honda, if Honda is projected to take a stake, they're going to, buy into Renault or, Nissan Renault. And I think, Nissan benefits, but Honda could get some EV technology out of it because they desperately need something. Because they had to partner with GM for the Ultium platform to get the Prologue out, which was just clearly not their first choice. Right. But they had to do it because you have to have an EV. It's where they're at. What do you think the future of Nissan is in the next 2 years?
Man, I think the Nissan hate is crazy. Honestly. I know, You know, you look at cars like the Sentra, you look at cars like the Pathfinder, whatever, and it's not the sexiest alternative. Maybe you think they're still CVT in some places where they aren't. But like if you look at the majority of their lineup today, it's either fighting for a top spot or it's so much cheaper than the competition that it doesn't matter.
Yes.
We both drove the blue Sentra.
Yep.
And I know it's a CVT, but I left that car being like, I can get one of these for 22 grand.
Insane.
And it's fully loaded.
It's a nice car.
And it's a nice machine, right?
Does it have the best interface? No.
No.
But I don't care because if I was in a position where I need to spend less money, a Civic you're getting into 30 grand territory.
I was
with
just
a lot
going
of
to say,
Civics.
yeah, 100. It's 8 grand cheaper than the equivalent Civic. Like, what are we talking about?
So
you know?
it is the value play,
Right?
And it's a simple car. It's not it's an internal combustion engine. It's a 4-cylinder. It doesn't even have a turbo.
Yep.
It's like just it lives. You know, let it breathe. Let it do its thing. There's very limited technology in the car, and that's a good thing. So I do agree with that. I do think Nissan gets a bad reputation. I just wish Nissan was still a major player in a motorsports way.
Yeah.
Because what they don't have is a halo car anymore because the GTR is obsolete.
Yep.
It's cool.
Yep.
If you hand me one and say, hey, drive this for a week, of course, it's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy myself. But the problem is it's like $160,000 or something crazy. It isn't a 911.
Right.
It used to be the dirt cheap turbo killer. Because when they came out, they were like $65,000,
Yep.
and it was like, and we're fucking up a 911 turbo.
Right. Yeah.
That's a big statement.
I totally agree. I think they're getting back to not the Halo car, but they are getting back to the notion of Nissan, at least in my mind, what they used to be, where it was just like the do-it-all thing that could live for a long time. Like if you look at the Tacoma versus the Frontier,
Sure.
The Frontier is what everyone wanted the new Tacoma to be. I say everyone. I mean like
Me.
Yeah, I mean like tacomaforum.org, like what that crowd wanted the new Tacoma to be, which was naturally aspirated still, leveraging the same frame just with some updates and a new interface on the inside.
Absolutely.
It does all those things. It does them well, and it's like 30 to 40 Gs. Yeah. Huzzah, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are definitely things Nissan can do, but ultimately the Nissan we're looking at today is kind of like, I'm not getting political at all. I'm just making a timeline reference. Relax. Obama's first term coming out of the recession.
Yes.
Right? You're being handed a recession.
Yep.
And it's like, good luck to you.
Absolutely.
And that's where Nissan is today. And they've had to do some things that are crafty. The Z is just a 370Z with some improvements, but damn it, it's got a twin turbo 6 and a 6-speed still. They didn't have to do that, but they did. The Sentra, like all these cars, right? They're making, mountains out of molehills. The Pathfinder with the 9-speed automatic instead of the CVT, but it's largely based on the last Pathfinder, but it has a new body and it looks cool. Like, you know what I mean? So they're doing their best, and I think they get a bad rap, but it's just, what could they do better given the financial state where they are right now?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
And I was reading an article about Nissan is selling cars, but their profits are down 90%.
Whoa.
So it goes to show you that it's like that Sentra or the incentives that they're giving for these cars are coming at a cost, because I bet your ass nobody's paying MSRP for a new Z.
Yeah, and I mean, when I said Sentra earlier for 22, the sticker on the car is 27.
Yeah.
So like you're getting that for $5,000 off.
Yes, on every car.
Right.
And if you look at like what does a dealer make per car, it's usually like 1% to 2% on the car. I mean, they're going to sell you a bunch of other shit.
Sure.
So trust me, they're doing fine.
Yeah. This isn't a save the dealer pod. Yeah.
What are we doing? These sales guys need to eat. No, they're fine. Yeah. They're selling you ceramic coating and wheel and tire packages. Right. I'm a sucker for some of these things too, because I have a wheel and tire package on my Honda.
Oh, let me get that with a low pro tire.
Absolutely. I'm like, you know what I'm pissed about is I haven't needed it.
Oh.
I like want to go.
You got to stop respecting the drive.
I'm like,
you need it.
I'm about to take that car off roading just so I can be like, all right, I'm getting my money's worth out of this $1,900 wheel and tire package.
Totally.
But no, this is definitely outrageous, because it's wild, because a lot of companies are screwed because they can't sell cars. Jaguar, right?
Yep.
Jag cannot sell cars. People do not even walk into their dealerships. Yep. Nissan sells cars, but they're selling them at such a loss that they're like blowing their whole business up. And that's really wild. So From there, let's go to the other side of this market where German cars in America have had a very strong reputation for quality, elegance, performance, and dare I say, reliability to a certain point.
Yeah,
yes,
I think
they
so.
like yes, you're gonna get a check engine light, but it will not die on you.
Yep.
It will run. Like, you know, you're so I'll be careful with that word reliability. But either way, buying 10 years ago, 15 years ago, buying a Mercedes, a BMW, even a Volkswagen, really a Volkswagen GTI, a 7 Mark 7, 7.5 really was a statement of personality, of almost class. That reputation has like dwindled so far that now when I see someone in a new BMW, I'm like, oh, they needed to have the badge. Or when I see someone in a new Mercedes, sometimes like, oh, I bet they've owned Mercedes their whole life and they just loyally go back to the dealer. It no longer feels like you're getting the best of the best.
Oh, okay.
And no one has made this more apparent than Volkswagen's fall from grace, because Volkswagen, it used to, like, I was always a big GTI guy.
Yeah.
I have pretty much dissuaded people from buying Volkswagens at this point, unless they're just like getting some bomb deal on a GTI Mark 8 or something like that. Makes sense. But they are now in dire straits, which was not expected for me. And I don't know all the gritty details, because I know they're trying to close factories. That's a tricky thing in Germany with unions.
Right.
Obviously, it's a very like worker centric kind of economy, and they have a lot of rights that's not easy to like be, it's not easy to pivot there.
Yeah.
What happens to Volkswagen?
Yeah, I think I've been saying I think a lot, and I apologize in advance, but Volkswagen took a large swing, right? Every company had to do something with EVs, or at least try, right? With different regions all around the world committing, whether you think they were going to walk it back or not, doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, it was said in a lot of different places that only EVs are going to sell in 2035 or whatever the hell in the future.
Well, not to mention the fact that in the EU, there are more strict regulations, there are more strict timelines.
Yep.
So for these companies to be looking at the future, they're like, oh, this is like right now.
Right. So Volkswagen has to do this. So what do? They need to develop an electric vehicle. Now, there's two ways you can do it. You can go the Chevy route, which is you leverage iconic nameplates to sell EVs, Silverado, Blazer, Equinox. I say Equinox is iconic and I almost threw up, but you get the point. People
what's funny
know.
is I always thought the Equinox was a piece of trash in the past, and it would be like, ew, that was just like a gross SUV. Now I'm like, this EV Equinox, I'm like, oh, you almost should have given it a new name.
It's slick.
Because it's so much more elevated than the reputation of its predecessor.
Totally.
You're not like saying, it's not like having an Impala or a Malibu,
right,
and then making a cheap thing and then hoping the name carries it. It's like, that's actually a nicer vehicle.
100%.
Anyway, sidetrack.
So there's that way, but then there's the other way, which is what Mercedes did, what Volkswagen did, and I'm totally only talking about naming. Mercedes, VW, they did not choose to leverage existing nameplates, instead chose to change things around. And when you do that, you potentially alienate, but you also have no brand equity. The ID name has zero.
Nothing.
It means nothing to anyone. Now, you tried to do something about it in the motorsports enthusiast community with the IDR, where you set records all over the place.
Can I tell you, I've never once heard IDR in my life.
Really?
That's new to me.
That
I'm
okay,
and I'm in the space.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that. Like, I know ID4.
Sure.
And like the reputation I have with ID is like, oh, bad.
Yeah,
because it's like, oh,
right.
Camisa had this like tirade about it, which nothing was wrong about it. It's just the reputation of ID to me is like, oh boy,
right.
You almost want to tear that off the wall right away.
100%.
ID is a 4-letter word,
right?
But yeah, that's the thing. You just said IDR, and I'm like,
it was like the prototype looking thing that was full electric and tried to set records.
I'm sure I've seen a picture of it, but like,
right. It doesn't stay in the mind.
It's laughable that I'm like, what does that mean? And I'm someone who just lives and breathes cars every day.
Sure. So they did that. And by doing that, you're already starting from a point that I think is lower than others. And if you don't make something really dang good, you don't have the nameplate to save you. If the ID4 was called the Tiguan EV, I think you're already at a better floor than the ID4 could have gone, right?
That's a good...
And it's a horrible vehicle. It's very comfortable, to their credit.
Sure.
Very comfortable, massive interior, pretty easy to road trip. But there's 100 better EV options for the price. But if it was called Tiguan, you're going to get the Tiguan owner being like, I'm just going to buy the EV version this time.
100%.
Versus the person going to the dealer and being like, why the heck? What does ID mean? Why is alphanumeric all of a sudden a part of Volkswagen's naming strategy? There's so many. They could have called the ID7 sedan that's coming out the Arteon because they retired that name. They could have called the ID Buzz still the Bus. They could have done all these different things and they didn't. And because they didn't, the vehicles they had to create had to be good, and they aren't.
Which is weird because their counterparts, Porsche, are doing that. They've maintained turbo on. They have taken all of that brand equity. And all of that recognition of a nameplate and put it into the cars. The new Cayman is going to be electric. Well, I was just looking at this and thinking, why is it still the shape of a Cayman? It is just intentionally the shape of a Cayman, not because it has to be. A Cayman has to be that shape because it's mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, 2-seat, 2-door, frunk. It serves those purposes. An EV Cayman, there is no such thing as an EV Cayman,
right?
Because you don't need to put things in those places.
Right.
You could build, it's a sandbox at this point. I need to build you can just build anything that performs in a way, but it doesn't need to be a Cayman. And this is where I'm like, well, think outside of the box. But they've used that brand equity and they've just kind of made function fit a form instead of form fitting function,
right?
And that's weird to me that Porsche's doing this, but Volkswagen is just let's try something new. In a world where people already kind of hated them and they had just enough things to grasp onto, like you said, Tiguan or Touareg
Atlas,
or
Jetta,
Jetta. I mean, make these things phenomenal. Use names that people are familiar with. And then let it go. But also, this is also a symptom of this attempted elevation of luxury for cars that don't need it. The best thing in the world right now to me is that Honda's lineup has HVAC controls that are switches and knobs, and they're cheap as fuck materials, but they feel good. This is a triumph in my mind, because whenever I get into my Civic, I'm like, yeah, sure, my Type R is a $45,000 car, but objectively it's based off of a $26,000 platform. So all the stuff inside is a $26,000 car.
Right.
But when I change the fan speed, when I change the temperature, when I touch things, it all feels really good.
Right.
Even though it's cheap as shit material. Even Lamborghini doesn't do this that well because their switches feel cheaper than the Honda switches.
I believe that.
Whenever I get in a Huracan, I am always thinking, why isn't this aluminum? This is a $375,000 car. That's crazy to me.
Right.
But Honda somehow figured that out, whereas Volkswagen comes along and they're like, oh, we need this all to be haptic touch and all that. And now it's confusing. It's difficult to find. It's messy because you get fingerprints all over it. It just looks gross. It might photograph well or appear futuristic, but in practice it's not. And we all know that these are things that could have just been worked out in testing before making choices.
The Tesla effect gone wrong, right?
Yes.
Not everything, just because Model S, Model 3 did well with a full screen setup, doesn't mean you have to do it. But it also shows off that you need to do it right if you're gonna do it.
It has to be seamless and it has to be better. If it is not better, don't do it.
Right.
And I wish people would write that on a wall somewhere.
Yeah.
If it's not better, don't do it.
Right.
If better means, I think what happened was people in the design world started pleasing their bean counter managers, where they would say, hey, look, I took away 9 buttons on the door because now you adjust the mirrors on the screen and this and that. And if we don't have to buy those buttons, I just saved us $30 a door.
Yeah.
Holy shit, $30 a door. And then that goes from there. And then they're like, great, do it. Instead of being this is a better user experience.
Right.
It's not. It only benefited the car company, did not benefit the consumer.
Totally.
Because guess what? they're not passing the savings on to you.
Yeah.
They're going to charge you more for the fact that this is space age technology and this. So just so you know, like BMW opens a Spartanville plant and starts building X3s and X5s there. You're not saving the transportation cost from Germany.
It didn't get cheaper. Yeah.
It's the same. And I actually had when I used to work in the apparel business, I remember being in a meeting once, and it was a big meeting, and I kind of almost had no business being there.
Okay.
But like my boss would he was great.
Dragged you in.
He was a director who would be like, you're coming in. And he would like bring me into meetings that like were a bit above my pay grade.
Sure.
Like 6 or 7 times above my pay grade. And I do remember one time someone talking about like, well, we can be more competitive in our pricing because we're stationed here and we don't have to pay these import taxes here or wherever. And I actually said that. I said, do you think BMW charges less money for an X3 because it's built in South Carolina and doesn't have to get on a boat? And everyone went, oh. And I personally contributed to like fucking over the consumer. But
I mean, hey.
But it's true. And these people, they're not doing things necessarily for your benefit. And maybe it's not this direct correlation where people see that immediately, but that is the sense when someone walks out of a dealership without a purchase, when they go, ugh, or they buy a car and they're like, I got to get the fuck out of this thing. Or they buy a car and they realize it's depreciated at an alarming rate because like no one wants it.
Yeah. So when you take that big of a swing and you set up factories dedicated to producing these, like you did in Tennessee with the ID4, and shift factories entirely to create ID3s and ID4s in Europe, and then these cars miss, you just lose.
It's so insane how much money goes away.
Mm-hmm. But Volkswagen deserves it, right? Because they said out loud on purpose, this is the end of the line for the Golf, right? Because it was going to be replaced by the ID3, which if you go onto the Google machine is the small EV hatch, which actually looks kind of sick and I really want one, but whatever.
But you would never in a million years remove Golf.
The name Golf, the name GTI, we're taking that away? Are you out of your mind?
If you're in a college marketing class and this is not a topic of discussion, bring it up.
Totally.
Because this is crazy.
I mean, it's akin to switching Twitter to X, but that's the problem, is when you think seriously that is a good idea and you can do that and get away with it, you're wrong.
It's crazy.
So you deserve what you're getting currently.
Right. All right. In terms of regulation, I remember when a few years ago, it was like, okay, by 2035, there will be it's all going to be EV or something like that. I remember like the second that was said, I was like, not a fucking chance. And it wasn't because I was on some high horse and it wasn't because I'm an EV hater. I'm just like, I'm looking around and I do not, that was 15 years away at the time. And I'm like, I know how long things take, especially in the car industry. Because when a car comes out in 2026, the development started in like 2021 or 2 or 3, it takes years to get this stuff done. And the speed at which Volkswagen sandbagged the shit out of Electrify America and all that, it's almost like a joke. It almost feels like a lot of these infrastructure things were intentionally bad because anyone off the street could have made these things better or told you, hey, these are some pain points that we're not going to like or whatever.
Right.
Even with GM, they're touting the ability to like tow quite a bit with it's like 10 or something thousand pounds with the Silverado EV.
Yeah, at least I'm sure.
I think it's more than, maybe it's, I don't know. It might be a lot more.
I know the Lightning is 10K. I'm sure it's at least, it's a lot.
I'm sure the listeners are gonna be like, he purports to know a lot about cars and it's actually 10,968 pounds. And
what an idiot.
Okay. Bear with me here. It's very difficult in a lot of EV scenarios to tow and charge because there's not a lot of pull-through stations.
Right.
You got to be pretty darn good at backing this thing up.
Yep.
And even if you do pull up to a charger, your trailer might be hanging out in the middle of a parking lot or blocking like a roadway in this parking lot in order to get this thing charged. Or you're going to have to pull up sideways and block like 6 chargers. Or if the one charger on the end is actually convenient, but it doesn't work because it's an Electrify America charger that like you get a 50-50 shot at this shit.
True.
These are pain points that have not really been worked out. But like the fact is, it doesn't take a genius to look at this and say that's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And they haven't really solved this. So that's why when they said 2035, I'm like, bro, we are nowhere near the painless experience of a gas station.
Right.
That's not gone. And also the cars are wildly expensive. The tech, we are at like, we're not at the breaking point in terms of like battery tech where it all just comes together and makes sense. You know, we're at the point where like internal combustion engines were when they only got 8 miles per gallon. Like we're kind of there right now where you're like, okay, they work, it's fine, but it's pretty rough to utilize. Whereas like, this is why Lucid I think is fascinating because they're able to aerodynamically and efficiently get like 5 miles per kilowatt hour. I think that's the benchmark. That needs to be where everything goes. So anyway, I knew that this 2035 reg was going to get pushed back. And now we're starting to see these companies pivot because we're going to end up with some form of deregulation in the next 4 years due to American politics. But this means that people are going to have to jump back into other things where they're like, oh, we can still keep this V6 or this 4-cylinder turbo. Or if you're Germany, somehow it looks like they're going to bring 8 cylinders back in Mercedes. What is the timeline?
Yeah.
And what is the future? Because now it's muddled.
Right.
Now it went from being like, well, look, we'll have to accept this EV future. This is what's happening. And I do think it will eventually kind of go and lean that way. But I just don't think that it's going to be a lot more mixed and heterogeneous than we believed it to be.
Right.
Where do we go? What happens?
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. 2035, I think always from the jump was never going to happen. Largely because public perception of EVs takes a lot longer to shift than that 16-year period of time. Also, charging infrastructure publicly takes a longer time than you think. You have to get permits. You got to get the electrical, like all the power needed to do the thing. You know, like that alone can take a year for one facility. Never mind a bunch. Right?
Not to mention you have to overcome the like big dick of the oil companies.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Do you think that this is happening seamlessly? Do you think like OPEC is just like, nah, go for it?
Yeah, right. 100%.
And I can already hear, doesn't he know that the energy is coming from oil and coal? It's like, yes, we get that. The efficiency is much higher.
It's still, yeah.
Like your power plant operates at a much more efficient level of power generation than your internal combustion.
Yeah, if your EV was plugged directly into a fossil, right, it would still be better over the lifetime of an EV than an internal combustion engine vehicle.
Don't they know that they're mining cobalt and it takes a lot of water? It's like, yes, it also takes a lot of water to like make petroleum products.
Right. And also like cobalt is gone in EV batteries soon. So like literally, oh my gosh, I have had many EV fighting war with people as recently as a week ago where people are like, you know, what do they do with the batteries when the cars blow up? They all blow up or whatever. Like all these stupid talking points. I guess ultimately, in my view and my perception of the world is that pick whatever you want. I think in the large majority of people's lives, a daily driver EV is actually what they need or what they should have. If you're commuting under 100 miles a day and have access to EV charging at your house, it is a no-brainer. Or if you're commuting under 100 miles a day, have access to EV charging at work. My wife, they have chargers at work. It's free. She gets free, quote unquote, gas for her car, no problem, right? But it's not for everyone. You get the guy that drives 300 miles a day, doesn't have access to charging at his home. Maybe he's a medical device salesman. Maybe she's a whatever. Doesn't matter, right? It shouldn't be for everybody because they don't want to spend 30 minutes at a charger every day, even if it's outside a restaurant that they frequent or a grocery store where they could easily just pivot their daily life to make it work. You shouldn't have to do anything. I understand that. I think where it goes is that the government incentivizes electric in such a way that it makes so much more sense than internal combustion engine that you go that route. That can be electric subsidies on vehicles continue where they are today. And because the prices of the vehicles lower, the overall cost to buy an internal combustion engine vehicle is just higher than a comparable EV that does the thing better. Or the fueling of EVs then gets subsidized by the government or whomever, states, specific companies, whatever that is, where it just becomes more appealing. If you want to drive something, the way that you do it is you subsidize it to some degree. You want to drive solar, subsidize it. You want to drive a specific type of building practice in towns and cities. You reorganize the tax code such that it's more advantageous to build that than the usual, right? So until you do all of those things together, you're going to be stuck in this loophole where someone's looking at a Silverado and being like, why am I going to spend 65 grand on an EV Silverado with cloth seats when I can spend 65 grand and get a 1500 Silverado diesel, fully loaded, leather, Super Cruise, all that jazz for the same price? Why would I do that? There's no incentive there.
Right. Well, and the other side is like the incentives may change in the way that like, oh, maybe you prefer an internal combustion engine, but maybe it's not the internal combustion engine you want. For example, a lot of people don't really love the idea of a 3-cylinder turbo Chevy Trax. So maybe for not a whole lot more money, you get the Equinox EV, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's more money, but like if you're a diehard, you might not want that.
Right.
That might, and I mean, I guess the other side of this is like having this conversation in the context of my listeners, our friends. We're not normal American people in terms of like how we view cars. Most people do not view cars the way we view cars. Most people do not read car news.
Right.
Okay. Like cars are ubiquitous. We all need them. We all use them every day. But it is not something that most people even remotely think about day to day, unless their car is giving them a pain in the ass. Unless their car
100%.
has a flat tire or a check engine light or is literally on fire, they don't think about their car.
Right.
And we consistently are like outspoken and loud about it because it's the thing that we are passionate about.
Sure.
So I try to keep an open mind about like, well, what would happen if, or what will be enjoyable to me in the future when this changes? And yeah, it is tricky. I'm like looking out at a sea of really cool internal combustion engines right now. There's actually like a Ford Model T down there.
Right.
Or no, it's a Model A. It's not a T.
I wouldn't have known.
A T is like complicated. A Model A is like a car.
Okay, got it.
I think a T is one of those ones where it's like you look like you've got 10 different instruments playing at once where you're like, oh, we just need to retard the advancement. Retarded advancement. Yeah. And you're like, that's not a throttle, that's a brake. Or that's, that's the whirly-do. Whereas I think a Model A was the one where they were like, it's a fucking car. It's got a steering wheel and a throttle.
Okay.
But, I'm looking at this stuff. I'm like, ooh, I like that stuff. But I also want to make sure that I'm like not alienating like cool advancements. And I think when I see electric cars right now, one of the things that bothers me is they're not taking advantage of the fact that they have a blank slate. And that goes for any car really, especially on interiors, because all automakers have done is replace things that exist with screens and then just like displayed the things that used to exist where the screens are now.
Right.
Why? The only company I think who's really like, ooh, that's kind of wild is like that. I haven't even been in one, but that new Lincoln display that goes across.
The Nautilus, or the Navigators where it goes all the way across. Yeah.
And it seemingly like redefines what like a gauge cluster could be.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas like everybody else is like, I've replaced it with a screen. And it's like, cool, what's going to be on it? They're like, a tachometer, a speedometer. And I'm like, well, I had that. Why do I need the screen to do this? That's fucking stupid. That is like when you have an Apple Watch and I put a Rolex face on it. I'm like, that's embarrassing.
Yeah, no, that's highbrow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm like, that's like, I have my running watch, right?
Sure.
It is not mimicking an Omega Speedmaster.
Yeah.
It is not mimicking a Rolex or a Patek or anything like that. It just tells me information that only this watch could tell me.
Correct.
So if you're developing an interior of a car and you have the opportunity to have a complete sandbox of screens, put something interesting on it.
Especially if you're going to charge that much of a premium over an internal combustion engine counterpart.
Absolutely. And the fact that like those screens are fucking cheaper.
Right.
For you.
Yeah.
You're not removing
because you're not doing buttons, you're not doing knobs, you're not doing switches. 100%.
It has to be cheaper. So you're like you're pulling the wool over people's eyes by being like, look, it's screens and we've taken away this and that and now it's better. It's like, well, no, it's cheaper for you.
Totally. Where one of the things that I think is done poorly, though, today is in dealers and how they advertise the vehicles that they're offering. A good example, again, is the one you brought up of the Trax and the Equinox EV, right? Is the Trax is 23 Gs?
It's cheap.
Call it 23, whatever, it doesn't matter. The Equinox at its base is like 31, 32, the EV. So we're talking about a $9,000 difference. Someone sees $9,000 and they're like, whoa, that's a lot of money. And I'm not talking about including subsidies or the federal incentive. I'm just talking MSRP to MSRP. The one thing I don't see any dealers do, and trust me, I go into a lot of dealers.
Yeah, if you don't know, Thanasi
constantly.
buys a shitload of cars. Like he trades cars, so it looks like he just is a dealership and has demos.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen you in the same car twice.
My complex is I'm saying that I don't, the different longer story, but I just buy them for myself. Anyway, is that they don't advertise or speak to the notion that owning an EV month to month is cheaper than an internal combustion engine car. And that over the life of the vehicle, right, that Equinox might actually be cheaper than that Trax, right? Because you don't need brakes, you don't need oil changes, you don't need tire rotations as you need tire rotations more often. But you understand what I'm trying to say. There's less to it.
But you got to keep it.
Right. Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And that's the thing. This goes into the consumerism of like sell more. It's like, or maybe we like have a thing and keep it for 10 years, which, which I think is maybe because everyone's in so much debt with their car loans. Maybe they will keep their cars longer.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
Sure.
All right. I want to get into a couple questions. One thing that is frequently asked of me, and I'm very bad at answering these questions, is like, what should I buy for X?
Yeah, sure.
So let's start at the low end. If you are 17 years old, you're buying your first car, you've got maybe like $10,000 to $15,000 to play with, or less. What should an enthusiastic teenager be hunting for?
Yeah, 3 cars, right? Car number 1, an 8th gen Civic Si. You get a K20. Shout out to Eddie's mental Civic Si coupe that he had.
10,000
That thing was
RPM.
nuts, and no one's doing that for 10 grand. But you get a car, and you probably find them under 10 grand, 6 to 10, 4-door. Get the sedan, don't get the coupe. Reliable, fun to drive, good space, good economy, does the thing. Plenty of aftermarket parts. Option 1. Option 2, an MRS. Okay, we're talking ZZW30 Toyota MRS. Mid-engine, good amount of space on the inside. Economical as all hell, and you can get them for 8 to 12.
I really enjoyed that car too.
Yeah, they're fun. They're not the fastest thing in the world, but who cares?
You know what's wild is they seem like, oh, it's just a tiny little car. It has a long wheelbase.
Yeah.
And so they are really good on the highway.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
it's still zippy and it's a small enough car to like chuck into a corner and stuff. But like it was alarming how like together that thing and planted that thing felt on the highway at 80 miles an hour.
Right. And then I'll go in a total opposite direction for number 3 is if you just want a cruiser, you want a highway bruiser, just get a Chevy Impala police vehicle. And I said Impala, but I meant Caprice.
Yep.
The Caprice PPV, or like the best Panther chassis Ford of all time. But get a Caprice PPV with the V8. Hopefully you can go on the forums and find someone that already swapped the SS Dash in one, but you can find one of those for like 8 to 13 G's somewhere around there, and it's a good machine.
Fantastic. That, and I've spent so much time in the Team Champagne Ninjas PPV, which obviously that was like a little done up and it has this one-off supercharger, but like, my God, you want to gobble some miles? The thing's incredible.
Yeah, it's just cool.
I want everyone to know that you are doing this off the dome.
Oh, yeah.
You did not have a list and I didn't tell you anything I'm asking you, and I'm blown the fuck away that you were like, I've got 3 cars. Like, this is insane. Okay. Next stage, let's say you've just gotten out of college.
Congrats.
Congratulations. You have $30,000 in debt, but you're making, let's say, $80,000 to $110,000 per year. You want a car and you can stretch a little bit because you know that you're going to be like in the money for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So you want to buy something somewhere between like $15,000 and $30,000, maybe 35. This is a tricky space because this is no man's land, and this is where former expensive cars kind of come into play.
Yeah. So I'll give you 4 options. We'll increase. 2 of them are going to be brand new. 2 of them are going to be used. How about that? So the 2 new, we'll start in the KDM camp. Shout out to the Hyundai Elantra N.
Okay.
$34,000. The new facelift looks terrific.
With you.
Outside and inside, it pops, it bangs, it understeers, it torque steers. It's just fun. It's not perfect, but hey, spoiler alert, cars don't have to be an absolute blast.
Agreed.
I would take one of those in a heartbeat. Now, if you're looking at, let's say you're a little more boring, you're in the SUV camp, I don't know. I'm just going to recommend it, and people can hate on me. I don't care. The CRV. Get a CRV hybrid if you can. Even if it's a sport, that's totally fine. Yeah, comfortable, economical, looks fine, right?
Wait, I will go further than that. There are some people that are going to listen to this and go, he says this all the time. I think the new design of the CRV is one of the best car designs.
Yeah, I would get it in silver.
I think it is so beautiful and proportionally perfect.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I'm not a CRV buyer.
Sure.
But I am like, every time I see one, I'm like, that's how you do it.
Yeah,
like,
I agree with that. Yeah.
Like, fuck, there's not an angle of that car that doesn't do it for me.
Totally.
Like Honda's design language on that car is insanely good.
Agreed.
And well-crafted.
Agreed. So that's like your, daily driver, do everything kind of machine. Like you do that and then you buy an MRS as like a second car to have on weekends.
All right, so those are the two new ones.
Yeah. So if we're going used, my first camp is a 981 Boxster.
Oh.
Get it. Enjoy it, love it. You can get them for 27 to 32 G's. If you're very lucky, you can find an S variant for under 30. I saw one last week for like 29 G's. You're not going to get something that sounds better. You're not going to get something that looks better. It might be a little more maintenance wise, but the thing that the Porsche Boxster unlocks is the Porsche community, which could potentially be advantageous for you in life.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
It's true. Like, you meet a lot of people
doing the drives, going to all the events. You never know who's going to show up. And that gives you the key to it.
Is owning a Porsche the new golf?
Maybe.
Like the game of golf?
Yeah.
In terms of like, oh, I golf, therefore I get to network with these like executives that might give me a job. Like owning a Porsche might be golf for those who do not want to play golf.
Maybe. Honestly, that's a good, I never thought of it that way.
That's insane.
I need a Porsche now.
Fuck.
Shit, I gotta call my wife. The fourth option, if I said CRV, I gotta give you another SUV that might be super used, and I'm gonna stay in the Porsche camp. Get yourself the best Cayenne you can find.
Oh, baby.
If you're doing long distance, get a diesel. It's under 30 grand. It's so cool.
And they tow. You can you can tow that Toyota MRS if you need to.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing all the things, right? And it looks good while doing it. It will look good for a long time. Toyota. Porsche did a really good job with the design of the Cayenne. I even like the first gen turbos. And I know those were ugly, but I'm also a 996 stan, and I almost said C4S, but those are now over 40, which
what
is
the
annoying.
fuck? Oh my God. People keep coming back to my 996 videos and my 997.1 Carrera base video.
Yeah.
And like the whole point of that was like, wow, look how affordable they are. And now like 5 years later, people are like, yo, nope, that's doubled, or at least like an extra 20 grand. It's crazy. Okay. So the only recommendation I would have for people with those choices, especially with the Porsches, get your PPIs. If you're going to spend money on like a budget sort of 981 or Cayenne, spend the $150 to your local shop. Please, God, make sure.
Even if you're getting an S2000, like whatever it is, if it is a used enthusiast option, get it looked over.
100%.
Full stop.
I promise you there are things you will not see when you slide under that car in someone's driveway, and you will not hear because you're excited about your flat six. Well, someone at the Porsche shop down the street who's working on like 30 of them that day is going to be like, this one's fucked.
Yeah, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Correct.
Okay. And it's also going to help you negotiate because most of the items are not going to be catastrophic. They're just going to be budgeting for you where you say, hey, this needs $5,000 worth of work. I need you to split the difference with me.
Right.
All right. Next, somebody who is slightly established, let's say they're in their mid 30s, looking at myself.
Me.
I know, we're
Tears.
so fucking old.
Yeah.
What would you recommend in the, let's call it $50,000 to $75,000 range? Because I think this is the realm where that is a stretch for most normal people.
Yeah.
And all we do is talk about new 911s and this and that. And you know what? Like, I can't afford a Huracan Storado. I can't afford a GT3. But it should be that 50 to 75 grand is enough money to really get a fucking bomb ass car, whether it's a second car to complement a simple, reliable daily, like a Civic Hybrid or something, or a do it all car that you're like, this is my baby and I love it. And it's an enthusiast vehicle.
Yep. So I'll do 3. Brand new M2, I think is a good option.
Still
it
agree,
might not be your favorite, but ultimately it does everything.
It really does.
It might not do everything the best, but it does everything. You
It's
can
a
take
daily
a 6
driver.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a track toy.
Yep.
It's a looker. It's
Yep.
got some prestige and cachet to it.
Yep.
And I think the M2 now, because of what it is, it definitely has more cachet than the 1 Series used to have.
Yes.
Like it doesn't look like you. It looks like a choice. It looks like you chose the M2, not were forced into the M2 because you couldn't afford an M3.
Right. Exactly right. I couldn't agree. And you can get a manual. Who doesn't love a manual?
Pretty good.
The second one will go used. Everyone forgets these damn cars exist, and you shouldn't. The Lexus LC.
Yes.
You can now get them in the $50,000 to $70,000
Really?
range.
They're that low.
They're pushing I would say closer to 60 than they are, closer to 60, 70 than they are 50.
Yeah.
But even if they have 300,000 miles, I don't care. It
doesn't matter.
V8 is so good.
One of the greats.
And it looks amazing.
Beautiful car. There's one sitting out
Unbelievable.
there. It's next to the LFA. Actually, they must have taken it. It was
Crazy.
There was an LC 500 next to the LFA, and I took a picture of both and I put it on my Instagram. I said this or this, and I thought not a soul would choose the LC. It was split right down the fucking middle.
Really?
I got so many messages that were like, "Look, love the LFA, but that LC,
It's painfully beautiful.
it's gorgeous."
And it's a car that you could show up anywhere. I'm talking dinner at a restaurant, work, a Cars and Coffee, and people are going to be like, oh shit, remember that thing?
Yeah.
That thing rocks.
And it sounds the balls.
Yeah,
The
agreed.
V8 is so good.
Agreed.
All right.
Agreed. So we'll go in the other camp. We'll do an SUV just because I've mentioned SUV for everything. This is going to be a harder one for me to think of. $50,000 to $70,000. I think you're getting an EV. Get yourself a Rivian R1S
Okay. Yeah.
and call it a day.
I just saw on Apex Automotor, there was someone had posted a Consumer Reports survey with 300,000 people surveyed, and the question was, what do you drive and would you buy it again?
Yes.
And
Yep.
Rivian,
Yep.
I think,
Yep.
was the
Yep.
top of the
Every
list.
year.
5
Yeah.
out of 5 people were like, I would buy this again. Now,
Yep.
the question is always, is that because you're just like a Rivian stan?
Right.
Or is it because it's the vehicle you wanted? But I
Right.
think like Tesla stands are stronger than Rivian stands.
For sure.
So if the Rivian, I sort of trust the survey, just gut feeling.
Yeah.
I just trust the survey more on the Rivian side of it. Like, wow, you really would buy that again.
Yeah, I agree. And you can get used quad motor 800 something horsepower mental machines that are actually very good off-road for under that $60,000 mark. You can get Rivian demos for that price. You could do whatever. I would definitely look into one of those.
14-year-old cousin was doing donuts in a field in Northern California like a month or two ago in his dad's Rivian, my cousin's Rivian. It's my cousin's son.
Yeah, heard
so I think he's 14. He's gonna hate that I'm talking about this. And I don't know if he hit a rock or
Okay.
I'm not totally sure, but he basically folded a wheel in
Oh, hell yeah.
and did some fucking real damage.
Yeah.
And was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And so I just, it's one of
Can't
those.
park there. Yeah.
No, but the beauty of damaging dad's car at 14 is that like it's almost not your fault.
Yeah,
Because dad let
okay.
you do it.
Right.
You know what I'm
correct.
saying?
You
So-
had to be enabled.
So I was
Yeah.
at a family party recently, and someone told me about this. Like, oh yeah, he messed up the
Yeah.
Rivian. I said, oh, and then I went over and I said, so I heard you messed up the Rivian, and his face looked like I just got him in trouble. Like me? Did you know about that? And I was like, well, someone just told me. I'm like, but I'm not mad at you. I'm like, can you show me pictures? All I
Yeah.
wanted to see was pictures, and he was
Right.
like, okay, look, here's the pictures. Now,
Right.
what I didn't realize was I don't think he had fully taken responsibility for this yet.
Oh,
And so then
heard.
I talked to my cousin's wife, that kid's mom, and I was like, oh yeah, he showed me the Rivian and showed me what he did to it. And she goes, oh, did he admit to it? He hasn't said that yet. And I'm like, oh, so now I've snitched. I fucked over him. I narked on
he
my.
said sorry to you, but not me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to formally apologize, not having fully understood the mechanics of the lie.
Yeah.
Thinking that everyone was in the know.
Right.
So my apologies for narking on
Yeah.
my young cousin, but I'm sure he had a good time. And also the funniest part is that like my 16-year-old cousin and their two friends were in the car while the 14-year-old was out doing the donuts.
Hell yeah, brother.
And I'm like, I'm that boy.
Yeah.
I see myself in that kid because I would have had the older kids in the car while I said, hey, watch this.
Yeah. Hold my juice.
And the older kids would have been like, wow, you can do that in a car.
Yeah, totally.
So lots of respect. Sucks that it broke, but yeah. So just, don't maybe don't do that in your Rivian and you should be fine. They're robust.
My quick bonus option is the brand new Model 3 Performance with one caveat. Okay. If you purchase a Model 3 Performance, relax. We get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
We understand your 0 to 60. We understand it's fully revised, now has good suspension, now has better seats, now has whatever. We get it. Relax. Okay. No one cares. You're not the coolest guy around. You don't own a 911 Turbo S, even if you can beat one to 15 miles an hour before the Turbo S takes off. We don't care. But the fact of the matter is, it is a good machine and you can get it for under 50 grand. And there's nothing better than that for that price range.
All right. I have taken the reins of leading this maybe a little more than I should have. Is there anything that you're like dying to ask, talk about, or anything? And it's fine if not, because
okay.
I don't know if there's any burning things in your brain other than like Luigi Mangione.
McDonald's, you son of a bitch.
I can't believe it.
Yeah. Okay. Here's my question for you. Civic Type R, 45 grand, roughly.
Sure,
Okay.
yeah.
You have to make that purchase again. Do you go that direction, or do you do something that kind of replaces both that and the Lexus you have?
Ooh.
Because I know you have the Porsche, you have other vehicles, right? That could potentially scratch that itch.
Yeah.
Do you do it again? I guess is the larger question.
I think kind of no. And it's not a knock on either vehicle. I think this is tricky. Had I known that I was going to get the Lexus,
Yep.
let's say the Lexus stays, I might have gone a little more hardcore on the fun,
Okay.
reliable, occasional track toy.
Yeah.
Because, for example, when I bought that Type R, it was replacing my M3 essentially.
Yeah, correct.
Which
Yep.
meant that it was going to be my daily driver and a potential track toy.
Yep.
Which is a very difficult shoe to fill.
Yep.
That's a hard thing to do. So what I might have done, had I known I was going to buy like a dedicated winter daily that allows this car to breathe and not be required to be really even comfortable on the road or anything, I might have gone a little more hardcore with, say, like an E46 M3 track build.
Yeah.
Or and I know that's like not really a comparable thing, or like, I don't know, I could have bought like a Caterham 7.
Sure. Yeah.
I'd have to think, but I do think that maybe I would have gone more hardcore with the 45 Gs than a car that ticks a lot of boxes. But I also love the idea that I can give the Lexus a rest in the summer months when I'm like, well, I would like to get 30 miles per gallon on this trip and still have honestly, I think the cargo space in the Honda is the same, if not more, than the Lexus.
Oh, the hatch space in those in the Integras is absurd.
It is physics defying space. It makes no sense to me. I took 4 people up to New Hampshire the other day in the Lexus, and we barely fit everything in the back of it.
I believe that. Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the Honda, I'm pretty sure I would have had room for an espresso machine.
Yeah, right. I wish. Oh, yes. That makes sense to me. I mean, I think ultimately that is not a knock on the vehicle.
Not
It's
at all.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
But it's just to say that like the hindsight 2020 kind of jam. That's why I'm always curious.
The good news on that vehicle is that if things go sideways or wrong mechanically, everything is cheap. For example, if let's say I bought a 981 Cayman, right? For that money, you could find something like that. We were talking about that a minute ago. If that engine has a catastrophic failure on a racetrack because I starved it of oil or something like that, that's a $35,000 engine replacement, right? Whereas on the Honda, if I blow up a K20C1, I call a guy and it's installed it for $6,000.
Yeah, right.
Done. Right. Like it won't break. It won't be pretty. I won't like it, but it won't wreck me. It won't change my financial outlook.
As someone who is right now putting an engine in a Honda, yes, it has cost me roughly $7,000.
Exactly. So, and that's a real nice feeling that like you can destroy a gearbox. There are things you can destroy on that car. Not intentionally, but in the event of, let's just be realistic, that won't ruin my life.
Right.
Whereas like this is why people are like, why aren't you tracking your air-cooled 911? I'm like, because if it goes fucking sideways and goes wrong and I break something, I'm like, it's going to cost me $100,000.
Yeah. Or like, because you don't want to.
Like
who cares? You know what I mean? Like, obviously that is a very fair and valid reason to talk about the cost, but like ultimately, who cares?
Who cares?
Like, you know what I mean?
But we'll see how the thing is, I'm going to make this a little more hardcore over the winter, just with some wheels and tires, some brakes and things like that. And then it's going to go out on the track. We're going to play with it a lot next year.
Yeah, very cool. I'll be there with you.
I can't wait to see you. All right. Any parting thoughts before we call it?
Yeah, my last one for you is, what are you most excited to drive in the near future that you know is coming up?
Oh my God. Oh no, I'm so bad at this game.
That's okay.
The problem is because I
know OEMs can like spring it on you very last minute kind of thing, but I just mean in general.
Can I give an answer that isn't a new car?
Yeah, I don't care.
A Ferrari F40.
Whoa.
Somebody offered it.
Whoa.
And
it is an F40. It's not a Fiero.
It's a legitimate.
Which, by the way, a Fiero F40 rep would be sick. But anyway.
You know what? Two cars. I want to drive the Fiero F40 and then I want to go and directly compare it to the real deal. No, I had a viewer, subscriber offer their F40.
That's amazing.
And it's weird because if someone said, hey, come to where my car is, fly here, you'll drive the car. I think most people would think, oh, I'm not waiting. I'm getting on a plane right now.
Yeah, correct.
I'm honestly dragging my feet because I'm like, I want to look forward to this for like a while.
Right.
And so I think in the spring I'll make it happen.
That's awesome.
I'll go drive the car. And also I really want to meet this guy because he has cool cars. And I don't want to blow up his spot because I don't know how like public he is with his cars. But like we both own E39 M5s.
Yeah.
And like we've had similar experiences and stuff. It's just that his budget for toys is like astronomically silly.
It's F40.
It's F40. and so I'm just like, man, I'm so excited because
that's very cool.
I don't know that there's anyone else I would rather drive an F40 with. And I barely know him. I just know him from his Instagram, but I'm like, I think you're the guy.
Yeah.
I think you're the guy I want to drive an F40 with.
That sounds exciting.
He seems very responsible. He's not a psycho.
Yep.
I think we both have very similar like philosophy and enthusiastic driving.
Cool.
So I think we'll be safe, have a good time, make the car sing, and really just appreciate what the thing is about. So I know that's not a new car.
No,
that's
it doesn't
up
matter.
and coming.
That's
but I
awesome.
think like if I have something that I'm looking forward to, I think that's the thing I'm looking forward to.
Very, very cool. I'm excited to watch.
I hope it happens. I hope I actually follow through on this and I don't just go chicken shit and not do it, but I really want to do it. But in terms of like new cars, I wish, what is there anything that you're like really psyched that's coming out?
I mean, I want to drive a lot of things. I want to see if the WRX TS is worth Civic Type R money. I want to drive the Nissan Kicks because it's under 30 grand.
It's handsome too.
Like I want to drive all these different things, but we'll see.
I was supposed to go on the Kicks launch, then they delayed it, and then when they rescheduled it, I wasn't available. So I also, just shout out to Steve at Nissan.
Yeah, Steve rocks.
Oh, he's the coolest. If you made it this far, Steve, we do appreciate you. And
definitely.
You know what's funny is I think about him on such a regular basis.
I do too, actually.
Except that I don't tell him that. I talk to him once a year, and it's funny because he's probably thinking like, oh, that guy doesn't. And I'm like, Steve, you come up in my brain like so hilariously regularly.
I have sent Steve just like shout out to Steve from Nissan for those that are here and who are like, who the hell is Steve? I've sent him random emails just being like, hope things are well. Like, cheers. And I don't know. Or like, congrats on the Kicks launch, like things like that. Just because it is. It's great.
For me, it has nothing to do with getting anything from him.
No, zero.
It's all just because I'm like, he was a good guy. He always, he's done right by me. So I appreciate 100%. The dude. But all right. I think that's going to close it. We're going to probably go take a quickie walk around Garage 42 so I can show T what's going on here. It's been filling up, I'm sure, since the last time you were here. This looks
amazing.
Quite a lot different. If you are looking for fleet management, winter storage, or you just need to hide some cars from someone in your family that thinks you're a psycho, this is the place to enable some poor financial decisions.
The dealer thing is sick, by the way. To be able to be like, I have an appointment for whatever, here, go. That's so cool.
I mean, this is the deal. It's like everyone like dreams of having that Jay Leno's garage scenario where you're like, well, of course you have 300 cars because you can afford to pay people to work on them. Well, that's what this is. Even if you've got 3 or 4 here, it just allows, and especially the kind of cars you're probably keeping that are 3 or 4, they just need yearly service, right? So if you've got your Aston Martin or your Maserati or your Ferrari or your whatever, something AMG, this is the place that's going to be like, look, I know you put 400 miles on it last year, but it still needs the stamp from the dealer.
Right.
And you're like, shit, guess what? When you like my stickers get done here.
That's cool.
They take my cars to get my inspections.
I know. I'm just I'm making a joke because I don't have one of those.
That's
but anyway,
very funny.
Shout out to the DOT. Come after me. I dare you. I don't care.
The joke of it is you own like all the cleanest, newest cars anyway for the most part. So like,
I'm a white guy driving a Rivian R1S. So like, what are they going to do? Suspect? It's bad. That's bad. But anyway,
all right.
Here we are.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Check out the Patreon. I'm not asking for big money. If you like like listening to this podcast, it is free as fuck. I am basically paying to be here.
W.
And if you want to throw $3 just to throw almost a gallon into the GX while I drive my 50 miles each way, do the thing. Yeah. But like, you know, I that's the other thing is like, I know people are like, buy my courses. They're $400. I'm like, give me $3. Just if you enjoyed something, throw $3 at it.
To be fair, you got the POV Master Course YouTube video, which I'm sure has been viewed a million times, and that's free. So give the guy $3. Come on.
$3. Anyway, thanks so much. Don't forget to respect the drive, and we will see you in the next one.